Great level design should be like a tree trunk, strong enough to hold every branch of the game's many elements together. A great level can present gameplay challenges, rewards, and story all at the same time. Fortunately, those are exactly the types of levels we're talking about today. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games with genuinely impressive level design. Number 10. TUNIC. To say that designer Andrew Shouldice's TUNIC is a Zelda clone would be simultaneously accurate and incredibly reductive. While obviously inspired by the 2D entries in the landmark Nintendo series, right down to the protagonist's iconic garment, it also presents some of the most innovative design concept we've seen in a long time, especially in its levels. Shouldice has cited rock climbing as an inspiration for how the player interacts and progresses through TUNIC's adorable world. The game compels the player to progress steadily, observing your environment from various visual and conceptual perspectives, in order to plan or react accordingly while maintaining a level head. Throughout the game, the environment acts as both a tutorial and a reward mechanic. Observing terrain or various object interactions teaches you to consider new concepts and strategies, and a minor shift in camera perspective reveals secrets and shortcuts. Instead of dropping useless loot or collectibles on the player, TUNIC rewards them with discovery, new interactions, and new forms of progression. This sort of design philosophy should seriously just be the industry standard from now on. Number 9. God of War 2018. Santa Monica Studios' God of War could go on pretty much any best list for the foreseeable future, and its sequel, God of War Ragnarok, improves upon it in almost every way. But level design is one place where the 2018 game really shines, especially in its primary hub area, the Lake of Nine. Relatively speaking, few games do as much with as little as God of War. You spend a lot of time in the Lake of Nine, and it has a lot in common with Hyrule Field from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time in how it connects to the game's other areas. As such, it's a place you return to repeatedly. While Hyrule Field is largely empty and static, however, the Lake of Nine consistently changes and evolves throughout the game. It's an amazingly efficient use of space in a game full of great levels which are designed like a fusion between Metroidvania-style exploration and Dark Souls-like cyclical linearity. The levels sort of fold over onto themselves as you unlock shortcuts, ensuring you always feel a sense of progression even when backtracking. Number 8. Half-Life 2. Valve's Half-Life 2 has earned its place amongst the greatest games of all time for a lot of reasons, and whilst the game's physics took most of the spotlight upon release, it's the level design that has proved to be timeless. The visual storytelling in places like City 17 and Ravenholm set a standard that many games continue to struggle with nearly 20 years later. You consistently enter locations where the set decoration tells you a story that also aids your progression. Take a shed full of zombie corpses decapitated by buzzsaws now embedded in the walls. First, the scene catches the eye, guiding your progress. Anytime something in Half-Life 2 sticks out like that, it's telling you where to go. Secondly, it doesn't take Batman to figure out what went down here. People in the shed were defending themselves from zombies by launching buzzsaws at them. They may have been outnumbered, but you can tell by the corpses that the saws were an effective weapon, a weapon you will now use frequently. Almost every level in Half-Life 2 is this carefully crafted. If you have any interest in level design, playing it with the developer commentary turned on is required. Number 7. Sonic Mania. Why was Sonic Mania a one-off? The classic 2D side-scrolling Sega game developed by hardcore fans turned pro, it's arguably the best Sonic game ever made. After years of disappointing 3D Sonic titles, Mania's familiar retro design was, paradoxically, a breath of fresh air. That's because it thankfully recreated a core element that many of the 3D entries have failed to recapture: exploration. Classic Sonic may have been sold to edgy tweens on the strength of its lightning-fast platforming and attitude, but it certainly wasn't designed that way. Sonic Mania faithfully iterated on the broad verticality and branching paths of those old Sonic levels, and did so better than ever. Its levels only play out the same way if you choose to play them out the same way, and the difficulty of its various paths and secrets depends on your chosen character. For example, playing as Knuckles, you'll likely experience the same level much differently than you did as Sonic. It's almost like Sonic Team were taken in by their own marketing over the years. It took true fans to remember Sonic as it once was and bring it back, and the magic is all in its level design. Number 6. Hitman Blood Money. IO Interactive's recent Hitman reboot trilogy has been a major return to form for the series in every conceivable way, but even as great as the levels are in those games, it's hard to see how they could ever top the level design of Hitman Blood Money, because what made Blood Money's levels special was the technical limitations that don't exist today. Because of the smaller arena-like levels, Blood Money didn't present the player with a boundless amount of freedom. Instead, it was more like an interconnected suite of methods, and while you have the freedom to connect these methods virtually any way you want, some ways are better than others. levels. With the ultimate goal of every mission being to make your hit look like an accident, playing through Blood Money's missions felt like solving a series of elaborate puzzles. Almost like finding the fastest way to solve a Rubik's Cube, the game rewarded iteration and experimentation as you turned and twisted its many components, looking for the most efficient possible combination. Number 5. The Elder Scrolls 3: Morrowind. Developer Bethesda Softworks are famous for making games set in huge open worlds, but as beloved as these time-devouring settings are, there's something to be said for the more narrow scope of The Elder Scrolls 3: Morrowind. Before automated plug-and-play development tools made subsequent entries in the series, like Oblivion and Skyrim, more efficient to build, allowing for those enormous maps, Morrowind had to be crafted by hand. While this meant the game was limited to a small region of its namesake province, the attention to detail was, by necessity, expertly crafted. It's hard to imagine now, but before conveniences like compass waypoints and fast travel, Morrowind relied on NPC directions to tell you where to go. In modern open world games, this would be a nightmare, but in the more richly realised world of Morrowind, it worked. An NPC telling you to follow the eastern path just beyond the Ababal egg mine was like telling someone visiting your hometown to turn right at any recognisable local landmark. That is, it felt like a real place. Number 4. Dishonored 2. Clearly inspired by director Harvey Smith's previous work on games like Deus Ex and Thief Dark Shadows, Dishonored 2 improved on the original game's already incredible level design in just about every way. Like all of those previous games, Dishonored 2's levels consist of large open areas that host any number of objectives. How you go about achieving those objectives affects the levels in turn. The purest distillation of this concept is in the level titled A Crack in the Slab. Set in the dilapidated mansion of the Howard Hughes-like Aramis Stilton, you're given the ability to travel between past and present to discover how Stilton lost his mind. It's only by thoroughly exploring the level through both time periods that you're able to uncover that story. Much like real life, the ephemera of the man's home tells his tale, and it's only through understanding that story that you can alter it, not by making a choice that the game lays out for you, but rather the choices of your actions. Stealth games compel the player to be observant by design, and Dishonored is no different, but A Crack in the Slab pushes that idea beyond stealth and into the consequences of action or inaction. Number 3. Psychonauts. What makes Double Fine Psychonauts such a shining example of great level design is how the variety and challenge of every level directly corresponds to specific characters. Psychonauts could have stuck to its platforming genre and conveyed its numerous narratives through visual design. Instead, it goes a step further by also changing its mechanics. For example, entering the mind of a feared monster thrusts you into a world where you're a giant kaiju terrorizing the citizens of an imagined city. By acting as a lumbering, brutish villain, you come to understand the monster's actual vulnerability. But the most iconic example is the Milkman conspiracy. Taking place in the paranoid mind of a conspiracy-obsessed milkman, the player explores a quaint slice of suburban Americana. But in addition to being filled with shady government agents and facade homes, the level also winds through space like a ribbon. The ease with which you can fall off an edge to your death is an example of the game using its sometimes problematic camera to an advantage. Like the Milkman, you develop anxiety yourself over any potential wrong move. Number 2. Titanfall 2. Much has been written about the tragedy of Titanfall 2's launch, a young IP released alongside several blockbuster AAA franchises, and we could debate forever whether its doom was the result of incompetence or sabotage by publisher Electronic Arts, but one thing that's not up for debate is that Titanfall 2 is a downright fantastic game. A first-person shooter that alternates between parkour platforming and giant mech battles demands great level design. The fact that Titanfall 2 managed to accomplish this, plus an uncanny attention to detail, is downright magical. Effect and Cause is rightfully the most famous example of the game's great level design, but since we already have a time travel level on this list, we're going with the often overlooked Into the Abyss. Set in an automated factory producing cheap prefab housing, the level accomplishes so much. Aside from the surreal joy of platforming across entire houses as they're being assembled beneath your feet, the very idea communicates a breadth of information about this world. Imagine the most banal planned suburb you've ever seen, but 100 times the size. The level presents a reality we can vividly imagine without ever seeing it. The fact that this factory exists says everything. Number 1. Portal 2 Co-op. Either one of the Portal games could be on the poster for good level design, but there's no doubt that Portal 2 stepped things up. While the main game featured a myriad of new ways to solve Aperture Industries' diabolical puzzles, it was the game's multiplayer that stood out. Designing the game's complex physics-bending puzzles for one player is impressive enough, but the fact that developer Valve were able to pull it off in two-player co-op is every bit a testimony to the developer's notoriously high standards. The story of two robots who become best friends through facing increasingly difficult tests of logic and coordination directly correlates to the real-life experience of playing the game with another person. Whether you're alongside a friend or a stranger, Portal 2 is one of the rare multiplayer games that demands extensive positive interaction. As you and your partner work through puzzles, obstacles, traps and tricky platforming, there's no doubt that your bond grows. This is thanks in large part to the fact that most levels are designed so that you are always trying to help your partner progress, so that they, in turn, can help you. Portal 2 isn't the only game to do this, but it is one of the best. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Which of these games' levels designs really stood out the most to you? And of course, let us know of any others that we didn't include. Head over to WhatCulture.com for more content like this every day. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've been Cy for WhatCulture and have a good week.